you have to have the evidence, you have to have the proof that you are who you say you are. I share the things that have worked for me, and if they work for other people, awesome. And if they don't, no sweat.
So speaking of platforms, I've been following your meteoric rise on YouTube here the last couple years. From my understanding, I was watching you with Eric Sue. Shout out Eric. Yeah. You're spending about $3 million a year on content. That's a lot of money for a lot of people. I know though that there's probably good allocation of this, obviously, based on your goals. And I'm curious, like when you look at that 3 million, like what is that going to? Is that going to your editors? Where's this money going?
It's all team. I mean, it's all payroll. So it's all labor. So it's creative director, brand director, manager who actually manages like when all the posts go out across all the platforms. When you're making, I don't know, I think we do 350 posts a week. So it's 50 posts a day that happen across all platforms. So like somebody has to manage that. It's two an hour. Right. Just like making sure the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, making sure that the captions are what I would want them to say. Mm-hmm. Which can be, we've solved that pretty well. So I'm really proud of how we solved that. And then a lot of it's just editors, just people who, cause there's being able to, so there's like, and my team will correct, probably crucify me for simplifying it this way, but like one is you have to have somebody who can recognize moments that are valuable.
Yeah.
The next skill is kind of reordering it in a way that would make it a more viral or more rewarding piece of content for the audience. The next piece is understanding, does this build the brand or does this just get views? Because like they could probably snip some, ridiculous things that I say at some point, and probably get a ton of views, but it wouldn't build the brand the way that I would want. And so you need somebody who has the incentive aligned to really take care of the brand, understands what moments are valuable and understands how to package it, and then probably also make it contextual to the platform that's being distributed on. And so that's a lot of kind of different skills that pretty much all editors have to have. Yep. And that's where having like a really good culture within that team. And, Caleb does an amazing job.
Yeah. Shout out Caleb. Legend.
Yeah, he is. He's awesome. He does an amazing job running that team and giving the guys creative and gals creative space to both experiment on things, but also still do the 80-20 of like, okay, this is still the blocking and tackling. And so he balances a really good job of like allowing people their personal freedom while also making sure that we we paint within the lines.
Yeah. And so when you kind of break down that 3 mil, like where do you think, where does it go back in napkin? And you're obviously going to simplify it. Your team's going to kill you for this.
Oh, no, I mean, it's literally what I just outlined. I mean, it's, you've got the creative directors, we've got managers, and then we've got by platform, and then we've got editors in general.
And so by platform, you have like one person managing just that. Wow.
For the most part. And then sometimes there's multiple editors underneath, depending on how much stuff we put out there.
Yeah. And so then rewinding to when you started, because I think this is useful to people that are looking to start an audience from scratch, looking to get going. I talk a lot about, in Founder West, getting people like a core team to start with. You're looking to build your personal brand. You maybe need a chief of staff to start getting some of the operational stuff off your plate, getting a social manager, getting a writer, because a lot of this stuff, takes a lot of writing. Oftentimes, how do you kind of see, the core team when you started out, and how's that kind of scaled up? Like, was there, I've seen a lot of your content. You've talked about, going from the top down. So like, I know you brought on Caleb pretty early. You had experience with VaynerMedia and doing that side. Like, how would you advise someone to architect a squad?
So this is a really tough question, because it really depends on the means that you have. So for me, I can bring on, multi 6-figure people right off the bat, knowing I'm not going to get any ROI for 2 years. Yeah. I can do that.
Let's say you're doing 100K profit, because there's a lot of guys that
Then I would hire somebody like that, who has experience building a personal brand to a large degree. And what I would actually refrain away from is the guys who only talk about like views and algorithm stuff and like are what I call hacky. Because like it's like the people who have the biggest brands on every platform do none of the things that the quote growth experts talk about. They just have great brands because they provide value to their audience. And so you need someone who sees the big picture and is not like, hey, let's do a listicle. It's just like, okay, sure. Is that gonna like really build the brand?
Yeah, I don't know. That got BuzzFeed.
Right. What? Yeah, right. I mean, actually BuzzFeed is a perfect example of like optimizing the crap out of all of the hack stuff, but like missing, in my opinion, like the main point. Mm-hmm. And so I look at brands like The Rock. I look at brands like, I think the Kardashians I look at a lot just from a branding perspective. I look at Taylor Swift. and you just look at like what the moves they made are, like Taylor Swift's not hacking anything. You know what I mean? And she has one of the most influential broad bases like ever. And that is the type of brand that we strive to build. And so you need somebody who really understands that. And most people don't, because branding is a harder thing for most people to understand. Like that'll probably be one of the next books that I write will be around branding. And that'll partially be for my own team, so that we can be really, really clear. Now they've heard many of my rants on branding overall, but just to put it in a really succinct way for the masses. Because I think like one of the most underrated, the most underrated skill, and the difference between Alex at $100 million net worth versus $1 billion net worth is going to be the brand.
100%.
Like is under my understanding of brand, I think will be the pivotal thing that will take us from 100 to $1 billion.
And what do you think is the breakthrough that you've had there? Because I know, there's a lot of people out there with misconceptions. They think like designing a fancy logo, just getting a good name, it's the right color palette, this kind of stuff. And they kind of are just slapping lipstick on a pig. I'm curious, like, how do you view it? What's changed over the years that you're like, okay, now I kind of feel like, I've got the ability to create a brand that gets goodwill, that can get to the $1 billion plus, that you're looking for?
I'm going to use different language than the audience is probably used to when talking about branding. But branding is teaching behavior at scale. And so if you think about the origins of the word, branding was branding cattle. So you had a cow and you would sear, some sort of logo into it. And so then we have to ask, what was the objective of that action? Well, the idea would be that if someone saw the cow next to a cow that had no brand, they would behave differently, right? And so for a cow that had no brand, they might take it, they might kill it, they might leave it alone, whatever they would do with an unbranded cow. But with a branded cow, they might return it to a specific owner, or they might kill it because they hate the owner, right? So like it's still a brand, and you might hate the person who's the owner. But the key difference is that it would change your behavior. And so if we kind of extrapolate onto that, what we did was like by changing behavior, that's functionally teaching. And so when we teach things from babies all the way to adults, it's associating things that people know with things that they don't know. And so the thing that they know should be the valuable thing, and the thing they don't know is your brand. And so then you associate the thing that audience deems valuable with this logo or this tagline or these colors or these shapes or this person, and then they say, oh, these are similar. And then you do it enough times that eventually they become one and the same. And then you can drop the thing and have the person, and they will still behave the same way as though they were receiving this value, but that has now been disassociated, or at least not paired in the same image. But then you can take that logo or brand and associate it with something new, because now they do know this thing, and put it onto a t-shirt, and then they will behave in the same way. And so fundamentally, that is what we were trying to do when we create a brand, is that we were trying to program behavior at scale, which is why brands are the most valuable thing that a company can have. Like if you look at Warren Buffett and the companies that he buys, he's begun buying a lot of brands. Like Apple's not really even a technology company anymore. It's really just a brand. And brand, you can measure the power of brand based on the difference between what you can charge for a commodity and what you can charge for the branded version of the product. And so if you can continue to raise price on a product based on the brand, that is an indication of the power of the brand itself and how much it has been trained and associated with value for that audience. And so that is what we try to build, because it's one thing to have a salesperson. It's another thing to be able to literally just imprint something on it and immediately buy, sell a shirt for $500 that costs you $10. And like, there's a reason that LVMH just prints money, as a conglomerate, because they understand brand.
100%. Yeah, no, I talked to a lot of founders, and they're confused around like, I want to build this brand. I'm not trying to get my content out there. And what I often talk to people about is when you're having that much difficulty, just remember like the purpose of content, the purpose of your brand is to help people solve a problem and to drive value for them. And at the end of the day, your customers' problems can very much become your content strategy, helping solve those. I'm curious, when you're going and like buying a company, investing in a company, and the brand's suffering and they're looking to kind of turn it around, what's your process then for developing that word cloud of things that you want to be associated with, and then actually like establishing that brand through the messaging? Yeah,
it's inside out. And I actually think it's the same thing for personal brands. It's inside out. You have to have the evidence, you have to have the proof that you are who you say you are, and then add 2-3 years, add 1,000 reps and iterations and continuous and consistent association, and then people will start to say it. Because Like brand isn't what you say about you, it's what your customers say about you. And it's more that branding happens and you do things and then branding occurs. So like you do things and then your reputation happens and you try your best to associate with the things that you think the widest, percentage of people will associate with a positive thing for a specific audience. Like, what is it? Black Rifle Coffee has a very specific audience that it puts out stuff that audience will find valuable that other audiences would find despicable, right? And so still also being okay with the idea that you're going to lose a percentage of an audience whenever you make any kind of polar stance. You will lose some and you'll gain some. And the idea is that you just want to gain more than you lose. Like Bud Light made a gamble by doing the Dylan Mulvaney Bud Light thing, right? And they lost more than they gained from that move.
Yep.
But they did gain. They gained some people who didn't drink Bud Light that were like, good for Bud Light, I'm going to drink that. But they lost way more people who were like, no, I will never drink Bud Light again. Now, look at what they've done now is they've made a massive partnership with UFC. So they were like, our bad, how do we do the opposite of Dylan Mulvaney? The UFC is probably, the strongest brand in the opposite direction that they could associate with. And I'm sure Dana bent them over backwards for that, endorsement. To try and save them, a very iconic brand otherwise. And so whenever you make any change to a brand, you always risk. And you just want to make sure that you gain more than you lose.
And so what are the words that you guys are trying to be associated with?
Well, I would ask you, what things do you think, because it's from the audience. So what do you think we're associated with?
I think some of the things, 100 million seems to be a moniker that you're already using and we'll be using a lot more. The marketing side of things, I think generosity is a big thing. Seems like, the whole slogan there for a while was like, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Yeah. And so when you guys are then going and architecting like a YouTube content strategy off that, is it like, how are your kind of like ideation sessions going on? Is it like the balance between kind of data, the brand, stuff you want to be putting out there? I think a lot of people get lost in the soup of like, how do they develop a content strategy? And I'm curious, you guys are someone that's doing it right. And I don't think you're following like, the path that everyone else is telling you to. So what's the path that you guys are carving?
Yeah. We don't have like our 5 pillars of content and like we've only done 4. They like, just like laughing at this. Like, we're not like, oh, we did 4 this week. We have to make sure we get the 5th one in.
Yeah.
We just try and reverse engineer from the consumer or from the audience member and reverse where they're currently at to where they want to go and see how much bridge we can build for them. And people have different problems. Some people are not in shape. Some people are not motivated. Some people are, struggling to go from 1 million to 10 million. Some people are struggling with, recruiting the right people. Some people are struggling with co-founders. And, fortunately or unfortunately, I've had experiences with all those things. And so I share the things that have worked for me. And if they work for other people, awesome. And if they don't, no sweat. And so I think that's really what we just try and focus on. To your point, like we try and solve problems. We try and provide value. And using that, using the value equation in the offers book is still kind of the predominant North Star for what we do. It's like, what's the dream outcome? How can we increase their perceived likelihood of achieving that outcome? How can we decrease the time that it's going to take someone to get there? And then how can we decrease the pain, the effort and sacrifice associated with the actions of doing the thing to get the dream outcome? And so it's like, if we can maximize the dream outcome, the perceived likelihood, minimize the time and minimize the pain, we will have a valuable thing.